So, one of the good things at going through the muck are books like this. I want to use the rest of the time to kind of talk about your book and what you're up to now. And everybody watching, if you have any questions for myself or Danny, please do leave a super chat. The super chats do allow this show to continue to exist. But we're going to talk about this book. I did read it when you first sent it, which I think we were talking, it's been about a year and a half. So it's not super fresh in my mind, but I did review a little bit. I forked through it some. So American exceptionalism and American innocence. Danny, what's wrong with American exceptionalism? I remember being told we were all exceptional in grade school. Is that not the case? Was I lied to? What's going on?
Yes, you were lied to. We were all lied to. That's so, and it's much bigger. And what we try to talk about in the book is how American exceptionalism, of course, it's a big lie. I mean, it's a big lie depending on your vantage point. If you are the elite, if you are descendants of the slaveocracy, if you benefited from the genocide of indigenous people and from the enslavement of Africans, and then from the system of exploitation that ran through both of those processes into the current period, then you are in fact going to embrace American exceptionalism. The problem with it is that those in power, the ruling class, have used this ideology to basically universalize their interests for everybody else. So a lot of people, even the most progressive of the left, and Bernie Sanders has done this a bunch, the Squad does this a bunch, even on foreign policy issues, they end up holding on to this idea that the United States can be a more quote unquote perfect union. It can live up to these values, right? And there's no real analysis or conversation about, well, where did these values of freedom of speech, where did these values of these constitutional values, where did they come from? They came from a system that was always based on this exploitation. So if we want a society that can live by some of these values, we're going to have to look at the economic and political basis of where we're talking about. And that's what the book tries to do. The book tries to hit on a lot of issues that and a lot of topics that I think are still very relevant. We go over Black Lives Matter. We go over the whole introduction kind of starts off with the fake news narrative, and Obama was the architect of that, and how it was all about protecting the sanctity of the United States, right? Going after these people like Ron Placone and Jimmy Dore and Black Agenda Report, right? Silencing them because they're causing all of this chaos. They're making the United States look bad. Susan Rice going on MSNBC and saying that Black Lives Matter is being supported by the Russians. All of this is all about painting a picture of the United States under siege, meaning that the United States is actually what it should be and what the founders wanted it to be. So that means alternative voices need to be suppressed. And I think that it's so insidious, this ideology, because one, it's first of all, it's racist in character, because it has always been about how to make the US a more effective and benevolent quote unquote empire. It's the ideology of Joe Biden in a sense, right? Although Trump definitely ascribes to it as well. There is no one in the elite that doesn't. But the book is more about how do we think about this ideology and its impact on our movement? Because while we saw a lot of positive developments, the uprisings against policing, racist policing, and corruption, the uprising against the 1% in Occupy Wall Street, and how that morphed into the Sanders insurgency. But there was still a lot of silence on something like US foreign policy or Obama's legacy, or a lot of the things we're talking about right now. We argue that a big reason why they're not talked about is because they go over the line of acceptable discourse. They go over the line of what's acceptable to talk about the image of the United States. Because once you start getting into these very deep rooted systemic problems, you begin to realize that no, the United States was never exceptional. The United States was never a democracy for people, for the masses. It was always a system, a society designed to benefit the rich, to benefit a certain class of people over really the rest of humanity, but more so also particular nations, particular groups, uh, and until we get a more full picture of that history and how it applies to today and our situation today, we can't really move forward as a movement. We'll continue to do things like spend all of our resources in the Democratic Party, and I think that that's really the purpose of the book and the basis of it.
Well, Danny, I'll push back a little bit. I would make the argument that America is exceptional. It's exceptionally cruel, but we could agree to disagree. No, let me ask you. This is kind of an aside on some of the stuff you were saying. Do you think it's fair to call Joe Biden a neocon?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I mean, 100%. What? Well, I mean, the neocon wing of the duopoly emerged at the same time that Joe Biden was making his career. I mean, if Joe Biden collaborated with segregationists like like Thurmond in South Carolina, like if he can do that, then why is his vote for the Iraq War? Why is his constant defense of the invasion of Iraq? And why is his consistent support for neocon imperialist policies? Why is that not
Yeah.
neoconservative? I think a lot of people really do. And this is part of our book too. It's like there's a lot of grasping at straws, almost trying to find ways to make
I remember
people
that
like
part.
Biden look better. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, I do remember that part. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I call him neocon too, and it's like, well, how was it for you emotionally? Just as another aside, like, because it's like, I mean, I was in this weird headspace, and I feel not alone. I mean, I know I'm not. Where it's like, yeah, I'm happy Trump's gone, but then Biden's coming in, and I mean, look, Danny, I am an optimist to the end. I have still not completely abandoned hope that between now and January, we won't just abolish the presidency. I'm holding out hope for that. We just abolish the presidency. Then you got to watch Trump lose, but you don't have to watch Biden take office either. And that is a win-win.
Yes. Yeah. No.
I'm not giving
Emotionally,
up hope.
look. Emotionally, it's a rough ride. I mean, I think us on the left had to be honest that this election was a very difficult one because to me it was an election about nothing. Because what I think this shows is that even though there has been a lot of progress made, and we can't not be optimistic about the fact that people are dissatisfied, a lot of a lot of the electorate, which it has its both progressive and very non-progressive elements to it, but when we think about just what happened during the 2020 election, it was a constant middle finger to progressives. And then it became really a referendum on Trump, and a referendum not on policy, but just on whether you want Trump or whether you want not Trump. And the result was Biden won by a bit. And then the liberal class, especially the more elite sections of that liberal class, they went out and celebrated, and a lot of people celebrated, especially on our coasts. I'm sure you got a little bit of a taste of that, but here in New York, a lot of celebrations, and that was very disheartening. Just because even though you know that the dissatisfaction is there, you know that the United States is really a pressure cooker at this point in terms of the contradictions and the level of suffering people are going through. You also know that there is a whole army of people ready to defend this system as well. So it's going to be a battle, and a little discouragement, I think, is just realistic, is just realism, is just an understanding of the situation we're in. But the optimism should be that if this pandemic, if this moment has taught us anything, it's that this overall empire that the United States rules over is in a very, very delicate position globally. It's a very delicate position here in the United States. Its legitimacy is shot. So really, what we're fighting is we're fighting a real class war against all of these responses that we're going to get from this very delicate position. It's going to be tough, but there's optimism in that we know we're in this stage, and we try to lay that out in the book that we're in this stage of this. There's no reforms coming. We're not going to get from the establishment just by watching them do their thing. We're not going to get anything, but we will get more people understanding that, and that could lead to more possibilities for real insurgent and revolutionary, hopefully, action.
Well, what is the best case scenario outcome then for all this? Like, what would you like to see as far as, breaking this down?
Well, at Black Agenda Report, we would always like to see a resurgent Black liberation movement and a resurgent liberation movement for oppressed nations in the United States that can revive what I think have been forgotten just historical realities that, without the most progressive constituency in the United States, without the most radical constituency, the movement here will not progress. It won't grow without a more mobilized Black polity in a left direction. So I think the best hope is that all of the progressives, there's an army of them. We do have millions of people who want things like Medicare for all, who want to fight for more socialist, at least socialist-ish society. It's really the best case scenario is that those forces begin to make strides, and Movement for People's Party is one. Third party vehicles are one side of that, but to really make strides in pooling resources together, pooling people together into dues paying mass organizations that are focusing on these very critical problems that are facing people right now, and then doing the really hard work to then ensure that people who get involved in those struggles to stop evictions, to get involved in struggles to organize workplaces, to protect public education, all of these things that are going to be part of our life for many years to come, move that into a global vision for humanity. Then we have friends. Then we have more friends, right? If we're just in the United States, we have no friends right now. Like, the United States is a friendless society. No one likes the United States. The United States is waging war everywhere. And a lot of the friends that we could have are the ones that end up being the biggest targets of the US's imperial machinery. So I think that those two, those many developments that need to occur happening all at the same time, that's our best hope. And, we're all, I think, your viewers and people like us, like, we all have a role to play in making that happen.
Well, where do you think, like a book like this, it breaks down what's really going on amidst people, what's really going on around the world, what we're really doing around the world. And, one of the things you really talk about is kind of the disconnect between what the powers that be are doing and where the people are really at. And one of the places I get my optimism is, when I look at 2016 to now, I do realize I'm not as alone as I thought I was. So, where do you think as a society we're at, mentally compared to the realm of conversation of the powers that be? Like how big of a differential do you think there is?
I think in terms of consciousness, there's been a big shift. Just there's always a response, right? Obama is the counterinsurgency president, in my opinion, and we talked about him a lot of Black Agenda Report in that way, because there's always going to be a response to movements like the uprising for Black Lives, for example. There was a response. There was a negative response. There was both repression and there was co-optation, and that always happens. But overall, the trajectory is most people in the United States with a semblance of consciousness are ready for police departments to look and act differently. That's a huge step in the right direction, especially if we begin to build momentum for efforts like community control of the police and more radical visions of what this defund narrative could be. The same goes for all of the progressive economic demands that people have. Those are class demands. I mean, universal health care, Medicare for all, canceling student debt. Those are extremely critical demands that the vast majority, at least the vast majority of people with any semblance of consciousness, which is millions upon millions, 80% of the Democratic Party base, it's unheard of, right? In the era of the Democratic Leadership Council, in the post 90s corporate takeover, you would not have even thought of something like that being a reality. But now it is. It's a reality that most people want this, and everybody is unhappy about the healthcare, quote unquote, the healthcare that they are currently receiving or not having at all. So I think we have seen a shift, and it is important to recognize that. It's very important. And we do, I mean, that was basically the basis of the book. It's like we want these ideas to be debated and discussed because we felt people are ready to do that. More people are ready to do that. During the Obama period, we called it the lonely period at Black Agenda Report because we got a lot of the backlash was incredible. People on the left, the black left, you know, in labor, the anti-war, you know, all of it. Everyone was not wanting to hear criticisms of the Democratic Party, criticisms of their much loved, beloved leader. So now we're in a different period. When Obama says these things, there's a debate, right? There's a debate. That was not when Obama called protesters in Baltimore thugs after the murder of Freddie Gray. There wasn't much of a debate. I will say there was a little bit more because Black Lives Matter had just started, but it was much more tepid and much more muted than it is now. The same goes with his Flint, Michigan debacle, as you referenced in your tweet. There wasn't a lot of debate about that when it happened. There's a lot of debate about it now. So I think that is a good sign for sure.
So, in closing here, tell me a little bit about the new show you got going on. You and Margaret Kimberly, who has also been on this show. Love Margaret, and I know you both work at Black Agenda Report. So, what's the new project y'all got going on there?
Right. Yeah, we are doing a program which we just started streaming. Yesterday was our first stream. And we're going to try to do it monthly. We've been doing kind of monthly episodes about what we feel is important to talk about, ongoing developments, and bring our analysis to it, right? Because Black Agenda Report is about the Black left, it's about anti-imperialist left, it's about coming at kind of what you do, coming at the news, coming at certain developments, maybe even more broad developments, so to speak, like the election, and analyzing them from this framework so we can kind of build more of a popular consciousness of what historically and what currently a left should look like. So we're trying to build a real left lens at Black Agenda Report. And so you can catch us at youtube.com/the left lens and definitely tune in. And yeah, we're really plugging along at Black Agenda Report. I myself, I'm doing some independent work at my Patreon. So I'm doing a lecture series on the book. So definitely come along, subscribe, patreon.com/Haiphong. So yeah, there's a lot going on for sure. A lot of work to be done.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make it our own. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today.